again, thank you for being here on a Saturday afternoon and everything that you do. Like, I have come to the Quail Creek organizations in 2013, 17, and now this is my third visit. Different iterations. So my personal story is one of growing up on the border from parents that immigrated to this country. I learned really quickly, like a lot of immigrant children that grow up really fast. They experience the impacts of poverty or the injustices of the working class, that they wake up from sunrise to sunset, and there are issues. And as children, we ask ourselves, is this fair, right? And that was my political question to me, and that's got me the seeds of getting involved, listening to candidates. I started just learning about candidates at a different level and then volunteered. But again, I am just 1%. There's a lot of people that have similar stories, but they never make it to the political question. And it's our job to get them to understand that a lot of the things that we're organizing is about talking to people. It is, my job, I have a list of 20 people a month that I will sit down and have a coffee. No agenda. I do it with leaders, elected officials. It's just organizing. It's just learning to talk to people at a basic level. And then when I learn about something that I'm not listening because I'm not directly involved, I tend to kind of like connect the dots that way.
Okay. So when you were 20 years old, where
I was
were
in
you?
college. I was in college,
And
and
then what happened after that?
this is therapy. No, because of my involvement politically, when I was in college, I did Eddie Basha in 94, Pon Johnson in 98, but during my college years, I also interned for the United Farm Workers. I did Union Summer in 1996. I ended up getting a fellowship to Princeton on public policy. Those were that was my upbringing academically, but primarily I led organizing boycotts on Guess that was using sweatshop labor. This was in the late 1990s. I tried to pass a resolution in the college to ban our endorsement of Nike, who was engaged in sweatshop labor in Asia. So that was my activism in those years. But they were formative, and I'm still here. So that's lessons learned. Question over there, Acero. Both of my parents started working in the fields in Yuma, and I had the blessing of a great education, a public education, the blessing of hard work of my parents waking up at sunrise and sometimes having to work until sunset. My mom ended up being a school cafeteria worker with a pension when she retired. My dad passed away 2 years ago from a heart attack, but he worked his entire life in the agriculture fields or being a truck driver for short haul hay and other grains from San Diego to Casa Grande and to the mills. So where I look at my story is that in a lot of Latinos, I think this is a struggle we have, is that there isn't a institution of why they belong to the Democratic Party. It is difficult to find a home, but I was blessed enough that I had a lot of different mentors when I was growing up. I started volunteering at the age of 16 because I was a curious person. I volunteered with the Yuma Democratic Party and started in 1992, actually. I was 16 years old. And I learned about Arizona history, and I learned about Rose Mofford, and I learned about, Dennis DeConcini. So I just share the story that, nothing made me in my history like a Democrat because my parents instilled. What they did instill was a strong work ethic. And when I was growing up, my dad, I had never seen too much emotion from him, but this was 1985, and he was sitting at his kitchen table with a really tough face, almost crying, because we were almost going to lose our house. This was 1985, the peak of Reagan, for example. And housing was difficult. My dad would travel to being a migrant to Salinas and Gilroy, and just supporting a household in Somerton and housing in Gilroy was just, it wasn't possible. So there was some stress, and that's where I kind of grew up. And a lot of immigrant children grow up really fast. You know, at the age of 10, you start seeing issues of poverty, issues of stress that your parents, and you're saying to yourself, they're working their entire day, something's not adding up here. And so as a child, your conscience kind of grows, and that's how I started in the political process. I am weird. I'm only like 1% of folks that have that kind of connecting of the dots. But throughout my life, I've always worked to connect the dots and have been very involved. I wanted to be a city manager when I grew up. I got my master's, went to Indiana University, came back to the city of Yuma, was a planner, planning and zoning and development, a grant writer, but I had the political bug. And my first campaign in 2002, my real first staffing, being a campaign staffer, was the race for Congressman Raul Grijalva that ran when the district included all of Yuma County in 2002. So that got me into the congressional space. Since then, I've worked for Congressman Grijalva, Congressman Ruben Gallego, where I was his district director, and now I'm the state director for Senator Mark Kelly. So I've had the service of being in state, but for members of Congress and our U.S. Senator now. But to me, it's not only my job. I can quit at the end of when I finish my job, but the reason the senator was elected is because of the work that you all do, the Democratic Party, the work that our allies do, but also understanding that there is a battle of ideology, of money, of power in our state. Arizona is at the tip of the spear. I mean, I'm not saying because we've seen battlegrounds, we're up there with Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota in some degrees, but we've seen how our state is so critical, but they're not just saying they're giving them power. Where the Republicans are very effective is that they understand power, where Democrats struggle with trying to understand policy. And we try to say, well, policy will bring us power. But the reality of this fight is it is about power. It is about having the majority at the state legislatures. It is about the governorship. It is about how the Attorney General conducts the business. And every time we lose one of those races, we step back. But we've been extremely lucky in 2022. We were able to elect a trifecta of our three top state elected officials with the governor, our Secretary of State, and our Attorney General. That had not happened since 1976 in our state. And we remember 1976, because it's a function of history. 1976 is connected to 1974, and Richard's resignation, and the collapse of the corruption in the Republican Party finally being exposed to the degree, and Arizona was at the tip of the spear of electing our governor, our attorney general, our secretary of state, and also members, one of our U.S. senators. So throughout my work as executive director through 2010, surviving SB 1070, the act that Governor then Brewer signed on, she was Trump before Trump was hurting our immigrants, right? We recall. And all the things that have come after that. But when I started looking at how much money was being spent in our elections, we had money that was publicly disclosed, and then there was money that is not publicly disclosed. The hidden money of not only money, but staff, organizations and allied organizations that supply ideology, organizations like the Arizona Chamber of Commerce, that is headed by a former deputy chief of staff for Governor Ducey. Previously, it was headed by the executive director of the Republican Party, former comms director of the Republican Party. So those individuals, when we almost won, we were fighting to win the majority in our legislature in 2024, the Arizona Chamber of Commerce came out with a report documenting all the bills that Democrats had introduced and saying that it would total $150 billion cost to the state if these policies were enacted. And so they were using it as a scare tactic. They used it as a fundraising tactic for corporations and and they're millionaires to give more money to them to keep that power, right? And all that was not a political expenditure, that was our report and education based on their C3. And so I want to share, I shared this to be a narrative, so you could ask questions later. So there's a lot of information on the slides. I'll share the slides who anybody wants to keep it, but like they're just pictures and graphs and numbers to share that story. It is the purpose of this presentation. So I like to say it's like the right wing hitting political infrastructure. In 2024, we saw, of course, Elon Musk spent a total of almost $300 million in political campaigns. That was across the board. Trump, Republican State Leadership Council, different governor races, different senatorial races. You have Mellon and the Mellon Institute, the very anti-labor. You have Adelson. She took over Sheldon Adelson. They used to own the Sands in Vegas. But they are very much a player. When I was running the race for Felicia Rivellini in 2014 for Attorney General, Arizona Public APS put in about $750,000 into an account for the Republican Attorney General's Association, and Sheldon Adelson matched it and then gave another $1 million to defeat Felicia Rivellini. They totaled $3 million in the last 3 weeks of the campaign, but they have a very much target into their races like Attorney General. But you can see, we only start seeing some of the money in the blue sector here come down when it's different individuals, and some of those individuals give a little bit to the Democrats, certainly more on issues. This is a list of organizations that we know. I mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, but the Goldwater Institute. How many of you have heard of the Goldwater Institute? Okay, a good number. They were, of course, under the ideology of Barry Goldwater, primarily organized as a foundation, a 501c3, a charitable organization. They oftentimes do studies, educate legislators on over-regulation or government interference or free economic policies that look at a more hands-off approach and low taxes. The biggest contributors to them are usually utilities, very rich individuals, and individuals like the owners of the Arizona Diamondbacks. We have the Free Enterprise, the Rock Products Association, primarily funded by the mining companies. The realtors are very partisan in our state. The realtors end up spending almost millions in our state, especially in the legislature. They want to make sure they funded. There was, our state is very dependent on sales tax. Our income tax has gone all the way down. Sometimes it's good for our families, but it has really hurt the revenue that comes into the state. So when you're too dependent on sales tax that comes and flows through the economy, the realtors did not want services to be taxed. So they put a referendum, paid a lot of money to get on the ballot a prohibition on taxing any services. So people who are getting massages or in other states that do at least pay for some services and that those services are taxed, the realtors, they hit it on if in some states they have taxed the sale of homes. And so that was one, and I don't think our state would have ever passed a tax on selling homes because we're also so reliant on real estate. But other services need to be taxed, and if we were taxing some services, we would be able to raise, there's some estimates of about $2 billion into our state. That could fund education, that could fund expansion to childcare, they could fund our universities, but they preempted, and it was the Realtors Association that did that. These are some of the organizations. How many have you heard of Turning Point? Oh, yeah. Charlie Kirk and the tragedy with him. And the situation that organization is based out of Arizona. I was on a flight from DC last night, and it was 5 p.m. We got stuck on Reagan National Airport there with the winds were coming too strong. They couldn't fly up the monument, so they were trying to fly northward, and they just spent too much fuel, exhausted too much fuel, so they had to come back. We didn't leave until like 3 hours on the flight, but I was sitting like 2 rows behind Scott Pressler. You guys, anybody know who Scott Pressler is? He's an influencer. He ran a lot of misinformation in Pennsylvania. He says that he won Pennsylvania for Trump. He was attacking that there was all this voter fraud, all this voter registration fraud, and he was priming up this. He's got over 6 million followers on Twitter, and he is just a chaos creator. And he was coming to Arizona because he's giving a presentation in Scottsdale, and he'll be here in Tucson tomorrow, along with other Turning Point allied organizations where they spend a lot of money saying protecting the vote, but pretty much restricting the vote for anybody that doesn't agree with them. But we also had the Heritage Foundation, who was the author and architect of Project 2025. You know, millions of dollars went to the Heritage Foundations prior to the election of Trump. None of that is political money, but it was the architecture of how they want to frame their federal government, and most of those provisions were added. ALEC is similar as the Heritage. It's a roadmap for state legislatures. This is where vouchers was kind of like developed. This is where legislation about cutting rural hospitals or funding. The National Right to Work organization works to eliminate labor. They've run legislation in our state to prohibit what they call project labor agreements for when there's major construction. Companies would sign on to union to be making sure that the contractors there have a right to bid on these contracts. Of course, the NRA and Cato Institute, that Betsy DeVos, former Secretary of Education, they pour a lot of money into our state. They're one of the regions, they partner with the Goldwater Institute, but they run a lot of money, and that's why we are at the tip of the spear on vouchers, because this is their experiment. If they fall here, that's why getting 150,000 signatures on that referendum is extremely important, because we need to get another 200,000 or more to make sure that it makes it to the ballot. The deadline is July, so if you can volunteer for that effort. And then we have pressure groups. I mean, look, this is me spending too much time on the computer researching, but I go into the 990 forms of these nonprofits. They're all publicly available through the IRS, and just looking at how much they're spending. And so in 2024, the Heritage Foundation got an infusion of millions of dollars, and this is how they prepared to, their takeover of government. A C3, a C4 is more, allows them to do it more with candidates. They're limited. They can only spend 49% of their expenditures on direct advocacy, saying vote for this person or not. But the other 51%, they could do a lot of issues. That's where they fund ballot initiatives and other items. Kevin Roberts, people that we don't know, former president of Catholic University, earns 668, wrote this book that has been kind of like the doctrine that folks in the Trump administration has taken to save America. Turning Point, the CEO, when Charlie Kirk was leading, and the data that's available, but I'm assuming Erica is also, she's getting paid $400,000 just on her salary. There's many other benefits. They were able to get $85 million into an organization that's based out of Arizona. It was founded by Charlie Kirk and Bill Montgomery, who now sits in the U.S., the Arizona State Supreme Court, appointed by Ducey. It is interesting, I fell into, because Scott Pressler, I fell into a rabbit hole yesterday. They've developed this app by an organization called Superfeed Technologies, and the organization has ties to Ukrainian companies. There was an article on Trump using it, and it's defunct, and they have some Russian connections. Here's a conspiracy, because all of this stuff usually leads to something. But it was interesting because Superfeed is now have developed apps that it's kind of like our VAN, our voter information in our databases, that gives people the power to knock on doors and information to call voters, to write postcards. But they've allowed like very easy access to that, and it's not only Turning Point. The Republican Party here is now using that same technology. In the Michigan, the Wisconsin, a lot of national Republican organizations are now kind of using that same technology company to build up their apps that are used to influence elections. The Center for Arizona Policy has historically been in Arizona. They claim they have passed over 200,000. These are the folks that push the prohibition of abortion in our state, or laws that restricted health care. These organizations have been extremely powerful, and they have received lots and lots of money to do what they do every single year. But this is the interesting thing. Kathy Herod and Peter, they start off as a baby lawyer right out of college. They go into work as a policy, as a person, like an attorney. Then they get hired, because of their experience, they get hired to be the general counsel for the Republican caucus at the legislature. So their power is not only money, it is the talent that they're breeding into the infrastructure in our state. And there's multiple examples of these organizations kind of feeding the infrastructure of our state. The Chamber of Commerce, again, they usually have blanket support for Republican governors. They try to advance tax cuts for the rich and the corporations that funneled by utilities, mining corporations. This is Danny. Danny's a good friend, but I always tell him, I always highlight him. He's a friend because he is in the circles, but I also understand that his loyalties are primarily partisan. And Michael Bailey was a U.S. attorney and worked for the Republican Attorney Generals, and is now working as general counsel for the chamber. In 2024, they spent a lot of their money, and sorry you can't read, but just to put an example, they spent, and this is one report, but they ended up spending on our legislative races. They created a PAC and they attacked our candidates. The Goldwater Institute, they are primarily just file a lot of lawsuits on cities and any government in the state. They consider their biggest achievement to be the universal support for the school choice program, which are vouchers. Vic Richie's is what I consider a behind the scenes person, but probably one of the most powerful Republicans that is not an elected official. Like, he's been chief of staff for both the House and the Senate. He's worked for Governor Ducey. And he has been very embedded in a lot of items, even to protect himself. He was the speaker, top aide, but he had a run-in with cocaine and being arrested. But he still has a job and continues to be a very powerful person. Sorry, this slide is meant to just kind of like give you an example of like pressure groups and like the policy. They move staff, and then they move into lobbying firms. This is the movement of money, people, and talent that makes this kind of system very present in Arizona. And I've spent a lot of my time just trying to understand, the movement of people and targeting individuals. So when I started just exposing the right-wing infrastructure, that was the end of my presentation, and then somebody told me this is extremely depressing. And I said, you're right. So what are we doing in our infrastructure? And oftentimes, I think as you are a member of the Democratic Party, you're here, you're an active participant, I want to share that oftentimes there's also just a network of progressive organizations that are a part of our fight. The criticism I would have is that a lot of us, even in the Democratic Party, are fighting policy, not power. Like, we don't have the concept that it is about power to organize and win majorities, win the governorship, the attorney general's race. these key positions, and also the understanding of how can we make sure opportunities for staff, so they are remaining in our state, they have opportunities to continue and grow in their political development. I mean, this is my story. Like, you know, I worked for congressional aid. I have moved in and out of different campaigns, and now I'm on the official side. That's why I'm here on a Saturday morning. I could finish my job on a Friday night, but it's important that people are connected and why we're fighting, because I go back to my parents, right? I go back to the mentality of a lot of immigrant children grow up really fast because, you know, what they're seeing. Now those children are seeing their parents being deported, or them not having the resources in their schools, and that's really important. So for the partisan side, this one is like, we have the Democratic Party, but we also have the DTRIC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. We have the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Pima County and Maricopa County, Young Democrats of Arizona. You have the Democratic Attorney General's Association. Every elected office has a PAC or an organization. You probably get all their texts on the same morning or emails from different organizations. And they're all built to, even Arizona list and Emily's list, because they're built to support Democratic women in races. These are partisan organizations, and they all have unique roles and lanes in our Democratic Party. They have specific donors that have a relationship to them, and this is where we build campaigns to harness the power and the resources of people. When I ran the Democratic Party in 2010 to 2012, and this is just an example, just to imagine, you know, the state party, and usually I like to say, like, candidates win elections, you blame the Democratic Party when you lose them. And so it's always like we're orphans in a lot of races. But when you're building the election team, you're looking at people and you're trying to leverage all of coordinated campaigns are primarily like a table to try to coordinate all of these people. A lot of opinions, a lot of mentalities, a lot of dollars. Some resources have more than others, but you're trying to put together the best case forward, and there's a lot of effort in this. That's why sometimes it's not perfect, because there's a lot of voices, but there is a lot of good work that gets paid. Like, we're not all going to spend on voter registration, for example. We're going to send mailers to get more people onto the permanent early voter list so they can participate early. There's going to be some common Democratic messaging to try to get those ballots in. Organizations like our labor partners that have election goals, the plumbers and pipe fitters, Local 469. We have our AFL-CIO, SMART, carpenters, ironworkers, the Arizona Education Association and their national affiliate. You know, these petitions don't get printed easily. It's very expensive. The National Education Association, the parent for the AEA, have already deposited $4 million to collect signatures and paid gatherers and volunteer efforts and support. It is a lot of resources it takes to put that on the ballot, but it's all worth it. It is a small price to the $1 billion that our state is spending on corruption with these voucher programs. And so when we say there's not a lot of money out there, but we're trying to spend it in the most effective way that will make the largest impact. And for Democrats, we always look at the greatest good for the greatest amount of people. These are partners that are separate. These are kind of like our Goldwater Institutes, but not a lot of us know about them. Lucha, has anybody heard of Lucha?
No.
Okay. Lucha is Living United for Change in Arizona. In 2016, they ran the minimum wage campaign. They increased the minimum wage to be indexed. And also now we have one of the large, we at least believe the minimum wage is at 12 in the state of Arizona, where the federal is still at 7. And we've been able to do that, and it was an initiative that Lucha was able to put together. Arizona Progress is a communication hub. BOLED is a Central Phoenix organization that organizes for on immigrant rights. Planned Parenthood also oftentimes is a partner in a lot of campaigns. Rural Arizona Action, RAISE, anybody have heard of RAISE? Jeannie? Our vote, primarily organizing African American communities, and CHISPA, that is funded through the League of Conservation Voters. They're primarily building movement and people organizing them on energy and environment issues. These are our policy partners. The Grand Canyon Institute was in our state. They have not been able to find more money, but it's still an entity that is organized. We've worked with Save Our Schools, that is also primarily looking at to dismantling vouchers. Has anybody ever heard of Children's Action Alliance?
Yes.
Yeah, their website is amazing. If you want to read more on the investment or the lack of investment in our state for on children, preschool education, nutrition programs, childcare, they have a lot of reports. The Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, this would be the equivalent to like the Heritage Institute. Now, they're not funded to the degree of what we're seeing in the Republican side, but there's a lot of great resources with the Center on Budget and Budget Priorities. CAP is the Center for American Progress, and the 6 is our version of ALEC. It is an exchange between state and legislators to try to get to progressive policies. And the Arizona Center for Economic Progress is a sister organization of the Children's Action Alliance. This is kind of like some of the meaty things that the Center for Budget Priorities kind of sets together, especially when we're fighting the big ugly bill that the Republicans passed in Congress. But they were primarily giving us kind of like background on the money and the resources that would cut in our state, especially when we were talking about the flat tax in Arizona. And then we have organizations that are more fluid. Our Revolution, which is Bernie's organization, Progressive Change, Emerge, Run for Something, Arena, Justice Democrats, Progressive Turnout Project, Indivisible. I know a lot of folks are involved. These are organizations that are changing the political landscape. They're tapping into a lot of Democrats, but they're also tapping into folks that don't feel very comfortable belonging to the Democratic Party. We don't have complete alignment, but these are allied and partners on the mission of trying to win elections. Indivisible, I've had to say for the past, since Trump got elected in 2016, the first time around, Indivisible was able to stand up great organizations, organizing from the suburbs to rural Arizona, and they've made a lot of progress. I would say there's a lot of people that are Democrats that are also part of the Democratic Party that share their movement, but they're able to organize different events. Mobilize is used as a tool. Has anybody participated in or seen 50-51? Yeah, right? So a lot of the No Kings protests that have come up, they're working on May Day. This is an organization that is not connected to the Democratic Party, but there's a lot of allies and friends that the way that they've been successful is they have what they call a distributive, anybody can create an event. If you want to organize 5 people to meet on a Saturday in a corner and do your action, they'll give you the toolkit, you'll sign up, somebody will reach out to you. Sometimes it's just on the allowance to actually do action. And I think, has anybody used 5 calls?
Yes.
Yeah, great tool. As a congressional staffer, sometimes I have mixed opinions when I get 300 calls on a Friday night. But I've been monitoring the calls, the quality of the communication. This is a husband and wife technology that they developed basically in their house to give people power to do more and to give them the talking points and to give them the targets. And they've kept it, and it's pretty simple. And you have a task, and you can use your app. Again, these are individuals working. I like to highlight these because this is part of the fight. I think when the struggle is real, when the effort of, the impact to our families is really devastating, people step up. That has always been a part of the progressive movement. We're not going to wait for the Democratic Party. We're not going to wait for organizations. We're going to stand up and do something about it. We, as organizers, are always looking at this stuff to try to kind of bring these folks into the political party, because I do believe these individuals have the spirit of our Democratic Party. We got to organize them into our party to feel like we are responsive, and our party needs to reflect that. And so we cannot just be stagnant to the systems that were in place in the 1970s. We've seen massive protests, great organizations throughout the country, actions from somebody's garage to every center square in our state. This is what really motivates me when I see individuals taking action and organizing and really telling stories. I am part of the Democratic National Committee. It gets even harder at the local level, to the state level, to the DNC, because all the cousins that I just mentioned, all our uncles and organizations, all part of the family. Everybody has an opinion, and so once you reach to the DNC, sometimes you might be very frustrated. I'm clearly sometimes frustrated, but I can't give up. We got to continue doing more. The Democratic Party is taking apart. Arizona, Nevada is investing in Arizona. We're hiring 18 to 30-year-olds that are going to do support for voter registration and registering Democrats. And so they're going to go into college as be prepared for when they return back from college. And they're starting organizing. They're doing boot camp in 2 weeks here in Arizona and for the entire western region. This is a QR code. The party is also understanding the power of storytelling. How many have you taken out a walking packet, canvas? Can I see a show of sign? Yep. Yeah, going out and knocking on doors. Yep. We have been, I think, we've understood from 2024 that we were knocking on somebody's door, asking them to vote for X person, or this is the reason why. And oftentimes we weren't doing the listening. We weren't asking them, like, what's the issue you care most? Like, just to begin the conversation. Instead of pushing our agenda, can we begin to listen first? Yeah, right. Imagine that, right? In this conversation, asking people what they care about first. And I think campaigns are finally getting that understanding, but it starts by, collecting stories. As I work as a staffer for the senator, my job is through casework and oftentimes find individuals that call our office with a dire situation, and oftentimes if it gets to the level that the senator is making a call, I want to share a story. We got a story from a mother from New Jersey that has been in this country for over 25 years. She is still undocumented. Both her and her husband do not have documentation. Her son is a U.S. Marine. Her daughter-in-law is also a U.S. Marine. They're stationed in Yuma. The son is going out to training. The daughter is knee surgery, so somebody needs to take care of the kids. She goes into the base, leaves and comes back, and at the return, the gate starts asking her questions for an ID. Well, they call the Border Patrol, and she gets picked up at the station there at the Marine Corps. She is then taken to Eloy. This is a 65-year-old, limited English, taking care of her grandchildren from her son that is a U.S. Marine. I don't know the definition. This is the story that my grandmother was not a U.S. citizen, but her son was fighting in Vietnam. How much more American do you have to be waking up every morning, going to bed, thinking about what your son is doing, fighting for our country? This is the same passion, that is an American. That is a definition of an American, but this woman was in detention. She spent about 4 months. We got involved. The senator went to go visit her in Eloy, talked to her. What was unique about that conversation is that they had a translator, and the senator asked her, did you go to basic training when your son graduated? And that's when the grandmother, cried. Like, I mean, the mother cried. And she got really emotional because she was really concerned that she felt so proud of her son. And that's where the senator also got emotional, because he remembers his mother in basic training when he finished. And it's stories like that that connect, different people from different paths. You have a U.S. senator and you have a migrant that is undocumented sharing a similar moment. And it is only done by storytelling. It is only done by us understanding and listening to people. And we got that story, we got that case that came in from a call that somebody had visited and had been taking care of people at the detention center. And they told us this story, and we got working on her. She got released and now is going through immigration court. She's got a pathway because her son is a U.S. citizen and he's over the age of 21. But there's technicalities because she came into the country unlawfully and there are bars in place. But if you have stories, I'll share the QR code and information. You might have, you're working and you're volunteering, you might have stories about people that have been cut off from Medicaid, from Access or SNAP programs that are really impactful, and we want to be able to listen to them. I do always, if you haven't given to the Arizona Democratic Party, your local party, I always think of you give most to the organization you're connected the most, but you kind of like taxes, right? You give 10% here, 25% there, and the rest to your local organization. Every layer of the party does different things. The state party, when you look at the infrastructure, we spend a lot of money just on the voter file. The access to maintaining data, it's very expensive. Candidates are using it throughout the state and are helping them get elected, but the quality of data is very important. So there's millions of dollars that is invested both at the DNC to the state party. I hope I gave some relevant information. Here are all my emails and my cell phone number. But I want to take questions. I hope I was able to connect the dots a little bit clearer, or clear as mud. But I would love to take some questions that you might have. So, over here.
What are the 1, 2, or 3 things that we can do as individuals to most help?
Intentionality matters. So if you are, you will be surprised at the power you have of volunteering 3 or 4 times. Like a lot of us do one shots, like we do one weekend, but if you can commit yourself in the month of September and October and pick races that you're going to invest and you're doing a little bit more to the campaign, that work is extremely valuable. And you organizers get to meet your organizers and not complain on them, but teach them to be better. These are young people sometimes, and they're learning. We want them to come back also. Sometimes that is extremely important. Like I want people that are organizers in Green Valley to come back next year and be a regional director, right? Because this is how we build power. This is they have the knowledge base. We don't want the returning. So paying attention to the people when you're volunteering, learning, sharing on social media, reporting back if you're seeing social media. I monitor a lot of rogue Facebook pages that are claiming a lot of disinformation. For example, send them over to your contact at the party or your, not to end the date, but they could be helpful packaging stuff like we're seeing this in Green Valley, you should pay attention, somebody should start reporting at the higher level because you are our ears to some of this information. And at the end of the organizing either by talent or money. So are the 3 things. But also learn, I'll share the PowerPoint, but there's a lot of organizations that we sometimes feel like the party is not the producer of this information. And like the Republican Party, it's not the RNC or the Arizona Republican Party. It's a lot of different organizations, and that's the purpose, is learn the spectrum of how you can get information and action.
I pay a lot of attention to social media, particularly YouTube and TikTok videos. We hear a lot every other day from Bernie and AOC and other real progressives. I'm not hearing anything from Ken Martin or others from the DNC. What can we do about that? How can we get that voice to grow?
Have you visited their feed they're like the Democrats. When you start visiting some different pages yourself, you actively go,
Right.
then you'll start getting on the spin of information.
That activates the algorithm.
Yeah, that activates your algorithm, and then you can see because the DNC is actually posting a lot of great stuff.
Are they?
Yes,
Okay.
and if you just go, it's called the Democrats, or look for, follow Ken Martin's account, you'll learn about what they're all doing. And so it's just about, sometimes you got to you have to proactively search for some of these organizations, so you're getting some of the proactive stuff and not being inundated.
Yeah.
Like my boss, I could say, is considering running for president and is like looking at the question. He has to get prepared. But I got all these social media like Draft, Mark Kelly. Somebody else is doing them. But I'm curious because they're putting a lot of AI stuff in there or like fake news, and like they're showing pictures of Gabby and them having a baby, or like it is like crazy. But what my theory is that these groups are trying to build, they're trolling for people, so then they can flip the script on who's actually like, these are, to me, these organizations that are kind of rogue are using it to grab an audience that could be susceptible to like other information. So they're trolling. These are trolling farms that sometimes are created.
You mentioned the Heritage Foundation. Are there some 503c opportunities to contribute to that support progressive policy?
Yes, I could get a list for that actually. That are 6 is one of them. 6 and their website and their contact information. The other one is there is an organization that is connected to the Grand Canyon Institute, but it's like the new iteration of Grand Canyon. That I could get you more information. So, but the Arizona Children's Action Alliance is also a worthy cause. So the Arizona Children's Action Alliance, primarily because they organize, and like right now I would recommend them going into their website and contributing to them, because they created the Arizona Center for Economic Progress that is doing a lot of the tax initiatives and supporting legislators on fighting back on the economic policies that are hurting our state. And that's through the Arizona Children's Action Alliance.
And that's a 501c.
That is a 501c3 charitable corporate organization. Yes.
It still seems that even though the goal of all the organizations on the Democrat side seems so much more noble, there doesn't seem to be any overriding kind of organization to get everyone on the same page, message-wise. I don't even know if that's a goal. I mean, it could be like anti-war right now, but I mean, is there any Democratic equivalent to the Heritage Foundation? You pointed out one that was kind of considered that way, but is there anything that has the same sway or the same concerted effort?
That's when I pray the Serenity Prayer. Because I can't control the things I can't control.
Right.
Because all of these organizations have donors, have particular interests, they're motivated. I would say the Center for American Progress seems to also do a lot in the heritage vein. That's why I kind of connected them. But they're not one of the same. There's different. But I would say the next thing is that I should have like a handout on like organizations. Now your money is sacred. I think I always believe in the partisan, the reason I'm very involved. I also contribute to organizations like the Children's Action Alliance, but I give the majority of my money to partisan purposes because I believe it is the highest level of electing people that will make the change happen. But you get to choose. I have a budget, and I try to stick to that budget. So.
Can you make your list with your priorities? In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that doesn't mean that they will be our priorities, but at least we will
for
have,
infrastructure.
We can start looking at the top.
That's a great, and it's also like a resource
and
for
then
people.
you'll send it to us.
Yes, I will.
And you send it to me,
Both.
we'll get it.
Sending her. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions. Over here.
How
And then, go.
do you feel about when, like the Attorney General, every day you get all the requests for money to help fund her campaign for re-election? Is that the route we're going now, is?
As a part of a campaign team, like some people are seeing them more often than not. Other people might be sitting and like watching the news, and Chris Mays pops up in the TV, and then decide to give her $50. Campaigns are going overboard. This is my opinion, but it's hard to stop them because the race for money is so high. The stakes are so high. So you get to pay attention to what you pay attention to. Sometimes they're going to have a key message, but the reason they're built that way is that you don't know when somebody's going to actually pay attention to a moment. And so either email or text oftentimes have different, like I've been watching TV and Chris Mays comes up and I actually have a text from her and like I've sent her $50 because I've already given her $1,500, but I mean like this is another purpose. But it is one of those things that you never know. So that text wasn't maybe meant for you at that moment. I hate to say like these campaigns will do better. They're learning to mind people a lot less, and good campaigns are not going to over-inundate you. I know our campaign with Mark Kelly has gone over the top sometimes, but even our own algorithms are kind of working to not oversaturate individuals, especially folks that have already contributed. Yes, last question.
Speaking of the Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, is Project 2029 real?
No, I do not know. But Project 29, who's leading it?
Andrew Cherney and Jake Sullivan.
I would have to get back to you. They're working, I know they're working in partnership with other folks. I would say a lot of the think tanks are still answering this question right now. Like a lot of the folks that are governing, especially right now, if the House majority takes over and the slim chance that we can win over the Senate, which there's still a possibility. If you want to give to the Senator Sherrod Brown in Ohio is amazing. The other person that has a shot is Mary Patola in Alaska. She's won in that state. There seems to be momentum. We need that race. And the other ones that are going to be harder are going to be like Iowa and Texas. But both of them are going to like pay attention. There's a lot of talent in here. Sometimes I feel is often untapped because many of you are professionals that have a lot of opportunities. The state party meeting, the executive director just recently sent out what he's calling like a talent bank. Like if you know how to take pictures, or you're a graphic designer, or you want to do X and you have this particular talent, and it's some other way to give, I think some of your resources, the party has set up a much more useful resource to sign up and see what else you could provide. Because everybody here, thank you for doing everything that you've already done and continue to do. The party's grateful, but the party's built on people like that care enough for everyone. And this is what gives me motivation to continue doing what we all need to do. Elections are tough. 2026 is, I think there's a lot of momentum that we can think special elections cloud our judgment, but special elections are lower turnout. 2026, Republicans have not unleashed the Kraken with the money that they will have to manipulate and drive out fear and racism. So we could still have wind in our sails, but there are no shortcuts. It's going to take door knocking, talking to people, and having great candidates. So Landslide, Mays, little story, I have known Chris for a very long time. She tributes to this, but I called her in May of 2021 asking her to consider a run for Attorney General. And the reason I asked her to do it was because I believe that she had the fight that oftentimes is needed in our state, and she clearly has not disappointed. She continues to do a lot. Yesterday, she filed a lawsuit against the Surprise ICE facility. And she put a lot of great arguments in there, and we're just monitoring of what they do, but she has a strong argument, so hopefully the courts rule in her favor. So again, thank you for everything you do, and I'll stay on for a little while, so until you guys finish. Thank you.